You can't let a young'un decide for himself. He'll grab at the first flashy thing with shiny ribbons on it.
Andy Griffith spent most of his life being seen as one of the kindest and calmest men on television, a symbol of peace, patience, and simple wisdom. To millions of Americans, he was Sheriff Andy Taylor, the father figure who always knew the right thing to say, who never raised his voice, and who made life in the small town of Mayberry feel safe and gentle. But the man behind that image was shaped by a very different reality, one filled with struggle, insecurity, and emotional pain that began long before fame ever found him. Andy Samuel Griffith was born on June 1, 1926, in Mount Airy, North Carolina, during a time when life was hard for many families in America. His parents, Carl Lee Griffith and Geneva Nunn Griffith, worked hard but struggled financially, especially during the Great Depression. They lived in a small house without indoor plumbing, something Andy later spoke about openly, not with bitterness, but with honesty. As a child, Andy was shy and often felt out of place. He was teased by other children for being poor, for his clothes, and for the way he carried himself. Those early experiences left him feeling embarrassed and unsure of his worth, feelings that stayed with him even after he became famous. Music became his escape and his comfort. When Andy sang or played guitar, he felt confident and free in a way he did not feel anywhere else. He discovered early that performing allowed him to connect with people without having to explain himself. At school, he found acceptance in drama and music programs, and for the first time, he felt seen for his talent rather than judged for his background. After high school, Andy attended the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where he studied music and earned a degree in 1949. During this time, he dreamed of a future in music or ministry, even considering becoming a Moravian preacher at one point. But his love for entertaining people soon took over. After graduating, he worked briefly as a high school music teacher, but he knew teaching was not his final destination. He wanted to perform, to make people laugh, and to tell stories. His big break came when he recorded a simple, funny monologue called "What It Was Football." The recording unexpectedly became a huge success, selling hundreds of thousands of copies and turning Andy into a recognizable voice across the country. That success opened doors to theater, film, and eventually television, where his career truly exploded. Broadway praised him, Hollywood noticed him, and television made him a household name. The Andy Griffith Show became one of the most loved series in American history, and Andy became a symbol of goodness and moral clarity. Yet even as his career soared, the emotional wounds from his childhood never fully healed. Fame brought money and recognition, but it did not bring peace. Inside, Andy remained sensitive, guarded, and deeply afraid of failure and rejection, emotions that quietly shaped his personal life and relationships. Before Andy Griffith became famous, before audiences adored him, and before television turned him into a national treasure, there was one person who truly knew him and believed in him when he had nothing to offer but dreams. Her name was Barbara Bray Edwards. Barbara was born in 1926 in North Carolina, and like Andy, had a deep love for music and performance. She was a talented singer with a calm, steady presence, admired by those who knew her for her dedication and grace. Andy and Barbara met while attending the University of North Carolina, where their shared love of music and creativity brought them together. They spent hours practicing, performing, and talking about the future they hoped to build. Their relationship grew naturally, built on friendship, shared goals, and emotional support. In 1949, shortly after Andy graduated, the two married, beginning their life together at a time when Andy was still unknown and struggling to find his place in the world. Barbara stood beside him during years of uncertainty, financial stress, and self-doubt. She supported him through his short teaching career, his early comedy performances, and the long road towards success. Friends described Barbara as patient and grounding, someone who helped steady Andy when his confidence wavered. When fame finally arrived, it changed everything. Andy's career took off quickly, and with success came long hours, constant travel, public attention, and growing pressure. Barbara, who once shared his creative world, slowly found herself living in its shadow. While Andy was celebrated everywhere he went, Barbara's own ambitions faded into the background. The private life they once shared became crowded with schedules, expectations, and distance. Though they adopted 2 children and tried to build a family, the emotional gap between them continued to grow. Andy became more controlling, more withdrawn, and more focused on his career, while Barbara struggled with loneliness and a sense of loss. She watched the man she loved become someone she barely recognized, praised by millions, but increasingly distant at home. The public saw Andy playing the role of a devoted husband and father on television, but behind closed doors, the marriage was under strain. Fame did not bring happiness to their relationship. Instead, it magnified existing problems and created new ones. Barbara endured years of emotional neglect, and Andy, despite his success, remained restless and unhappy. Eventually, the marriage could not survive the weight of fame, personal insecurity, and unspoken pain. Andy and Barbara divorced in 1972 after more than 2 decades together. Though Andy would go on to marry again, those close to him said Barbara was the love he never fully forgot. For Barbara, the end of the marriage marked the beginning of a quieter, more painful chapter of her life. One lived away from the spotlight, carrying memories of a man who became famous while she slowly faded from public view. The final years of Andy Griffith's life were far removed from the peaceful image he had once represented on television. As time passed, Andy faced a series of personal struggles that fame could not protect him from. His adopted son, Sam Griffith, battled severe addiction issues, which caused Andy deep pain and worry. Despite his resources and influence, Andy could not save his son from the path he was on, and the situation left him feeling helpless and guilty. Health problems also began to take their toll. Andy struggled with obesity for much of his life, which led to serious heart issues. He suffered a heart attack in the late 1990s and later required quadruple bypass surgery. As he aged, his body weakened and his energy faded. The man who once commanded the screen with ease became increasingly fragile. In his later years, Andy lived a more isolated life, far from the warmth of Mayberry that audiences associated with him. Though he received many honors, including the Presidential Medal of Freedom, these recognitions did little to heal the emotional wounds he carried. Barbara, his first wife, also faced a tragic and quiet decline. After their divorce, she lived mostly outside the public eye, struggling with health problems and emotional pain. She died in 1980 from a brain tumor, her passing receiving little attention compared to Andy's fame. The woman who had supported him before the world knew his name was gone, remembered by few, but deeply significant to his story. Andy Griffith passed away on July 3, 2012, at the age of 86, from a heart attack at his home in North Carolina. He was buried just hours after his death, according to his wishes, in a private ceremony. While the world mourned the loss of a television legend, those closest to him understood that his life had been far more complicated than the roles he played. Andy Griffith achieved extraordinary success, but his story is not one of simple happiness. It is a story of a man shaped by hardship, lifted by talent, and quietly burdened by emotional pain that fame could not erase. His life reminds us that public images often hide private struggles, and that even those who teach us kindness and calmness may themselves be fighting battles we never see. Behind the gentle smile of Andy Griffith was a man who loved deeply, lost painfully, and lived a life far more tragic than most viewers ever imagined. Andy Griffith was known to millions of people as a symbol of warmth, kindness, and comfort. On television, he played calm and wise characters who always seemed to have the right answer, especially as Sheriff Andy Taylor on The Andy Griffith Show. To viewers, he felt like a trusted friend, someone who represented a simpler and happier America. But behind that gentle smile and steady voice was a man who carried deep emotional pain for most of his life. Long before fame arrived, Andy had already experienced hardship. He was born in 1926 in Mount Airy, North Carolina, during a time when money was scarce and life was difficult. His family struggled financially, and his childhood was far from easy. Andy later spoke about feeling lonely as a boy, often escaping into music and imagination to cope. Those early feelings of isolation never fully left him, even when success came. Music became his first passion, and it eventually led him toward performance and entertainment. Before Hollywood ever noticed him, Andy met a woman named Barbara Bray Edwards. She was not famous, but she believed in him deeply. Barbara was with Andy before the world knew his name, supporting him emotionally while he chased his dreams. They married in 1949, long before Andy became a household name. In those early years, their relationship was built on shared hope and struggle. They faced life together as partners, dealing with financial pressure and uncertainty, but also sharing love and ambition. Barbara was often described as strong, private, and loyal. She helped ground Andy when his self-doubt took over. When fame finally arrived in the late 1950s, it changed everything. Andy's career exploded after his successful comedy albums and film roles, eventually leading to The Andy Griffith Show, which turned him into one of the most beloved stars in America. With fame came long work hours, constant attention, and pressure to maintain a public image. Andy was suddenly surrounded by people, yet emotionally he began to withdraw. Barbara, who had once been his closest emotional support, started to feel pushed aside. The demands of Andy's career often came first, and the quiet life they once shared disappeared. They adopted 2 children, a son named Sam and a daughter named Dixie, hoping to build the family they had dreamed of. From the outside, they looked perfect: a famous father, a stable home, and children growing up away from scandal. But inside the house, the emotional connection between Andy and Barbara was slowly fading. Andy struggled to communicate his feelings. When problems appeared, he tended to shut down rather than talk. Barbara found it hard to live under constant attention and the loss of privacy that came with being married to a star. She also watched Andy change, becoming more distant and emotionally unavailable. Though there were no public scandals or dramatic fights, the silence between them grew heavier with time. By the late 1960s, Andy was at the peak of his career, but his marriage was under serious strain. What had once been a partnership built on love and shared dreams became 2 people living side by side, but no longer truly together. After more than 23 years of marriage, Andy and Barbara divorced in 1972. The official reason was irreconcilable differences, a simple phrase that hid years of emotional distance, unmet needs, and quiet disappointment. The divorce marked a turning point in Andy's life. Barbara stepped away from the public eye, choosing privacy over attention. Andy moved forward publicly, continuing his career and appearing calm and successful. But those close to him later said that the loss of Barbara left a deep emotional mark. She was the one person who knew him before fame reshaped his world. Without her, Andy entered a new phase of life, carrying unresolved loneliness. Though he would marry again, the emotional foundation that Barbara helped build was gone. Andy's success continued, but something inside him felt broken. This pattern of emotional withdrawal and searching for connection would repeat itself in the years ahead. And while audiences continued to laugh and feel comforted by the characters he played, Andy himself was beginning a long journey through love, loss, and quiet suffering that would follow him for the rest of his life. After his first marriage ended, Andy Griffith faced a world that looked full of possibilities but felt heavy with loneliness. He had spent more than 2 decades of his life married to Barbara, building a life together and raising children. Now he was alone in a way he had never been before. Fame continued to grow around him, yet emotionally he was adrift, searching for a connection that could fill the space Barbara once occupied. Not long after his divorce, Andy met a Greek actress named Selika Kasuto. She was younger than him, with a background in performing arts, but she had mostly worked in her home country and was not part of the Hollywood circle. That distance from the American entertainment world may have made her seem appealing to Andy at the time, offering a life that was calmer and removed from constant attention. Details about their first meeting are scarce, but it likely happened in the mid-1970s, a time when Andy was adjusting emotionally after his divorce and the end of the Andy Griffith Show. He was still building his career, but more importantly, he was trying to navigate the uncertainties of life after a long-term marriage. In 1973, Andy and Selika married. On the surface, their relationship appeared calm and uncomplicated. There was no public drama, and Andy seemed to continue his career as usual. But underneath the surface, problems began to appear. Andy remained deeply tied to his work. He traveled frequently and poured his energy into acting, music, and other projects. Selika preferred privacy and a quieter, slower-paced life. That difference slowly created distance between them. Over time, their emotional lives grew separate, much like his first marriage. After about 6 years, in 1981, they divorced. Once again, the official reason was irreconcilable differences. There were no public arguments or scandals, but the pattern was clear. Andy struggled to maintain emotional closeness in romantic relationships, and his partners often found it difficult to keep up with the demands of fame and his private emotional withdrawal. This experience reinforced a growing pattern in Andy's life. Each new relationship began with hope and possibility, but eventually revealed the emotional walls he had built around himself. While his career remained strong and public admiration never faltered, his private life continued to feel unsettled. After his second divorce, Andy Griffith met Cindy Knight. She was born in 1953, 27 years younger than Andy, and had worked as an actress in television projects during the early 1980s. They met while filming a television movie together, and despite the age difference, they formed a fast connection. In 1983, they married. Unlike his previous marriages, this one endured. Cindy did not have children with Andy, but she became his closest companion, supporting him through his later career and into old age. As Andy grew older, his health began to decline. Cindy accompanied him to appointments, managed household matters, and became a stabilizing presence that had been missing for decades. Those who knew the couple described her as protective, devoted, and deeply connected to Andy, offering him a sense of steadiness that he had rarely experienced in adult life. While Cindy provided support and love, Andy's past continued to shape his emotional world. For years, rumors persisted about a possible relationship with Annetta Corsaw, the actress who played Helen Crump on The Andy Griffith Show. On screen, their characters shared a romance, and some fans and biographers believed the bond off-screen may have gone beyond friendship. Nothing was ever confirmed, but the speculation reinforced the idea that Andy's personal life was far more complicated than his gentle television persona suggested. Throughout his career, Andy was linked to other brief relationships, though most were private and undocumented. What became clear over time was that he struggled to maintain emotional continuity. He moved from one relationship to another, often carrying unresolved feelings from the previous one. Barbara, his first wife, remained a central figure in his emotional history. No matter how many relationships followed, she was the one who knew him before fame changed everything. This repeated pattern of attachment and emotional withdrawal created a quiet loneliness that followed Andy for decades. The story of his personal life was intertwined with his role as a father. Although Andy and Barbara had adopted children, Sam and Dixie, the challenges of parenting were often private and complex. Sam, the eldest, grew up mostly away from Hollywood, choosing a reserved and low-profile life. However, beneath that calm exterior, he struggled with substance abuse and personal pain. Andy attempted to help in private, supporting his children quietly without seeking public sympathy or attention. His public persona as a loving father on television stood in contrast to the reality of struggles behind the scenes. Despite his best efforts, the emotional weight of his children's difficulties left a lasting impact on Andy. The combination of past romantic fractures, fame, and private family challenges created a life filled with both public success and private sorrow. While audiences saw laughter, stability, and charm, Andy's inner world was marked by solitude, regret, and longing for connection. His marriages and romantic experiences, from Barbara to Celica to Cindy, reflected the challenges of balancing fame, personal needs, and emotional intimacy. Each chapter carried lessons, losses, and quiet pain. This was the second stage of Andy Griffith's life, a period where fame could not shield him from loneliness, where public admiration could not erase private struggles, and where the consequences of early emotional wounds became increasingly visible. As he moved forward, he continued to seek stability, love, and connection, often finding glimpses of it with Cindy, but always carrying the emotional scars from relationships past. It is impossible to understand Andy Griffith without seeing this side of him. A man whose kindness on screen was paired with private struggles, whose love for family was strong but complicated, and whose personal life was a series of attempts to heal, connect, and find peace that was often just out of reach. Over the years, Andy's story demonstrates the delicate balance between fame and private life, showing how even those who seem to have everything on the surface may struggle deeply behind closed doors. By the 1990s, Andy's career had slowed, but the patterns of his emotional life were well established. He had learned, through experience and sometimes failure, what it meant to love, lose, and endure. Cindy remained his companion, but the quiet pain of past losses, Barbara, Celica, and the unresolved feelings tied to earlier chapters, remained a subtle but powerful presence in his life. While the world remembered him as a symbol of goodness and stability, those closest to him understood that his personal journey was filled with complexity, struggle, and moments of profound loneliness. This period of his life was not marked by drama or scandal, but by the slow, quiet unfolding of emotions that shaped who he was in private. It was in these years, during his later marriages, and as a father coping with his children's challenges, that Andy Griffith's story revealed its depth. A story of love sought and sometimes lost, of private pain hidden beneath public success, and of a man continuously navigating the tension between fame and the human need for connection. These experiences formed the foundation for the final chapter of his life, which would be marked by both stability with Cindy and the lingering echoes of all the struggles and losses he had endured. And while the world knew him for laughter, calm, and wisdom, his personal life showed a different truth, a life defined not only by success, but by quiet struggle, emotional endurance, and the unending search for closeness that would always challenge him. As Andy Griffith entered his later years, the full weight of his personal life began to emerge in ways that were both quiet and deeply affecting. While his career had slowed and he enjoyed relative stability with Cindy by his side, the shadows of the past, his first two marriages, The unresolved emotional tensions and the private struggles of his children continued to shape him. Sam, his eldest son with Barbara, had grown up mostly out of the public eye, avoiding the spotlight his father occupied so naturally. On the surface, Sam appeared calm, responsible, and distant from the dramatic world of Hollywood. But behind closed doors, he faced serious challenges that would come to define much of his adult life. For years, Sam battled alcoholism and substance abuse, fighting demons that were largely invisible to the outside world. Andy, who had always tried to handle family matters privately, supported Sam as best as he could. But even a father's love could not erase the difficulties his son faced. The pain of watching a child struggle is profound, and for Andy, it was compounded by the knowledge that fame could not solve these problems, money could not erase them, and the public could not understand the private heartbreak he endured. Barbara, too, carried her share of sorrow. Though she had stepped away from the public eye after her divorce, her connection to Sam remained strong, and she witnessed the same struggles her former husband faced. In many ways, the tragedy of their shared history was ongoing, stretching decades beyond their marriage. While both Andy and Barbara had moved on with their own lives, the emotional impact of their early family experiences, adopting Sam and Dixie, navigating fame, and dealing with private pain, remained a constant presence. This enduring tension between public success and private struggle is what made Andy Griffith's story so compelling and heartbreaking. He was a man who had given laughter and comfort to millions, but who carried a personal burden few could see. As Sam's struggles intensified, Andy found himself balancing his own health and aging with the needs of his family. Cindy's support became invaluable, helping him manage both daily life and the emotional strain of seeing his children in pain. Yet even with a loving spouse at his side, the earlier fractures in his personal life, the distance from Barbara, the end of his second marriage, and the lingering emotional scars continued to shape his experiences. In the final years of his life, these private challenges were joined by the reality of his own aging. Health issues began to slow him, yet his spirit remained committed to those he loved. He maintained a quiet resilience, facing medical appointments, physical limitations, and the inevitability of time with a sense of dignity. Cindy, his third wife, provided unwavering support, becoming not only a companion, but also a caretaker who managed the complexities of his daily life and ensured that his final years were as comfortable and stable as possible.